Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of History After Hours. My name is Kevin Pumphrey, and with me, like normal, is Mr. Ron Franklin, Mr. Lewis Jolly, and Miss Emily Diedrich, and we are recording this at Collective Coffee. We are live. It is November the 14th, 2024, and as you might expect, this episode is basically about politics, international trade, and the election. So, with all that, we hope you enjoy the podcast.
My name is Cooper Campbell, and I wanted to ask, how do you think Trump's tariff plan is going to affect national trade?
We had a little bit of this conversation in the hallway the other day. The proposal for tariffs is upwards of 50-60% tariff on specifically Chinese goods. Is that what he's been talking about?
I saw up to 100% on some of those.
100%.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, specifically meant to ask, about the impact it's going to have on American jobs and maybe making American businesses come back to America rather than outsourcing labor in China. Do you think that'll be successful, or
so here
cheaper labor?
It kind of depends on certain factors, and it's not like you can just sort of wave a magic wand and kerplang American jobs come back. Manufacturing's already currently on the rise, although it's still not nearly what it was in the past. Tariffs are going to be tricky in that so much stuff is imported right now, and we don't have domestic production to take up the slack. So in the short term, prices are going to go up on a lot of different things that are imported from China specifically. And I'm talking about from clothing, gadgets, electronics. I mean, the plethora of things that may come in from that particular place. So it's anything at Walmart besides from maybe food is probably going to take a hit. So does that in the long term create tax revenue for the country that we can then reinvest back into the country, promote more manufacturing, get more people on? But like I said, there's going to be this time frame. There's going to be this gap before you can move from this moment that we're in to the more high level production in the country, where it might cause things to be more jobs and then maybe cheaper prices. So it's like I said, you can't just sort of like instantly make that happen though. So I think short term we're going to see some real fluctuations. But then it hasn't thoroughly worked in the past. Like I said, you don't have anything to turn to make up the difference. And so I think some people are going to be surprised.
So here's my little take on it. First of all, we're talking about macroeconomics. So there's 1,000 factors. So it's hard to tell. And the first go around when Trump started doing tariffs, then Biden takes over and he keeps a lot of them in place.
Right.
So, we all went crazy when he first did it because tariffs, I teach about tariffs from the 1800s, but I haven't even thought about tariffs. But there's a whole nother level to this, which it could be possible that Trump is using tariffs as a negotiating tactic. So whether it hurts American workers or manufacturing, it might be short term, like you said. But it depends on what other countries do and how they react to our tariffs, because they can raise tariffs of their own. So that can interrupt trade, but also it could bring more people to the table to give us a better outcome overall. But once again, we're talking about a lot of things, not just one element here. So
and I don't think people realize, even if there is a positive outcome, it's going to take time to get there. It's not like tomorrow prices of things are going to drop because he's announced tariffs, or when he becomes president officially and then installs tariffs.
No, prices will raise initially, and we'll have growing pains, and it will be, do we have, the political will to see it through, to listen to I hate to say it, but the griping and moaning of all of us. We'll gripe and whine and moan about how much this costs extra and how much this costs extra. And it'll be, see what happens when you elect this guy, see what's going to happen, all this was lies. So if they have the political will to see it through, you could see some side benefits. If you look at American manufacturing today, there's been a small revival in some industries. You see some clothing industries and companies that are coming out today that are completely from ground up from American cotton. I mean, you're talking about a lot of different channels of the supply chain that will be affected by this, from agriculture to manufacturing to shipping and all that.
Do you think we've got enough in-house resources to be able to handle those needs, or are we still going to have to import those things? Then that becomes tricky.
Not initially, no. That's the growing pains part of it. Things will be hard to get. Things will be more expensive. But also, will we start sourcing things from other countries that are willing to, air quotes, play fair with us economically and open up more of their country to American goods? And I think that's part of it.
A big chunk, too, is our military. We are the only Navy that even has a chance of regulating international trade between countries. I mean, we help protect trade between countries that have nothing to do with us, really, because of our Navy. No other country can do it. So, like, also, if you're talking about isolationism and pulling military back, that's going to interrupt trade, too, which means if we end up being isolated on our side of the world, things will cost more, and we will have to develop our own manufacturing unless we keep our Navy out there.
All right, let me complicate that even
South
more
China
then by saying
Sea.
if we pull back on protecting some of the other trade routes, then that makes our other trade partners vulnerable, which then, if they get swamped over by a larger power, let's say like China, let's use Taiwan as the main example then. If Taiwan falls to China, then we get tremendous numbers of electronics and chip processors and things like that for our cell phones and computers. If that gets interrupted at all, or if, like I said, if Taiwan falls, then that becomes majorly disruptive in people's lives. I just need people to understand that it could eventually be a good thing, but there's going to be this thing that you have to brace for, because short term, it's got a lot of pitfalls.
I say this like I know for sure, but one of the biggest fears, I think, of the Chinese government are the people uprising against them. If you have a huge trade imbalance and we pull a lot of manufacturing out of China and their citizens are not working and not being able to provide for their families, and they start to feel the unrest within their own borders, perhaps, that's where you may get some, like you said, people to the table to negotiate in better faith. But it's going to take 3-4 years.
If there's mass unemployment in China, like, you think this is rebellion potential? Or, I mean, I don't know.
I don't know if rebellion is the right word, but there will be pressure applied, both from us and from within. Mm-hmm. And I think that could help push people to the table.
Well, what if they just go around us then?
Yeah, unemployment's not going to be their problem. The problem is going to be their trade. They are a highly import country. They depend on so many other countries to keep the ball rolling.
You're talking about China?
China. They don't have the demographics that's in 20 years. They're not going to have a working population. They don't have enough people right now.
They don't have enough. 1.4 billion people is not enough?
And they're all old.
Oh.
They're all over 60. And the amount under 50 is dwindling. It's a pyramid. So they have a sea of old people with very few people to support. And so you're going to see some panic in China, according to people that know. I don't go there and count to see how many people there. But to some of the geopolitics that I've heard, China's upside down, like in a mortgage, in a bad way. And so I don't know. They're going to become desperate one way or another.
I didn't know about their upside down population numbers.
Oh,
as
yeah,
far
that
as the
one-child policy back in the 80s.
I know that Japan has that problem, and I know that South Korea has that problem. I didn't know it was China as well.
Yeah. Mexico's setting good. We're okay. There's a few countries that are doing really well with that. But
Russia's
demographics
bad.
is it.
China's bad.
Yeah, you got to have a working population, 30 to 50-year-olds. You got to have that to support all the people that are living into their 80s and 90s. There's a lot of countries that are going to be in that problem because, higher civilization, less families, and if you don't have enough people coming into your country, you get upside down, and all of a sudden you have a lot more old people and to ratio to young people.
So tariffs.
So yeah, the whole podcast about tariffs. I don't know if y'all heard the news. We're talking about tariffs, everyone. Okay, next question.
My name is Emily Williams, and this question comes with a statistic. So according to Pew Research Center, the number of Christian identifying Americans from 2010 to 2020 decreased by about 13%, and the number of atheist or agnostic identifying Americans, adult Americans, increased by about 17%. So my question is, do you think there's a possibility that Christianity could become a minority religion in America? And if so, how long would that take?
The growing trend across westernized countries, and I'll speak about Europe first, and then the trend is following over here. we're not nearly to the point that they are, but more young people in Europe currently, they have chosen to identify as either atheistic, non-religious, or semi-religious, I guess. So that trend has been going on for quite a while.
Okay, so America is very religious comparatively to other nations kind of like us, Great Britain, Western democracies. The only other countries in the world that have as many religious people as we do are Middle Eastern countries. And one of the reasons that countries become less religious is diversity. The more diversity you have, generally, this is why people live in cities that are less religious. People that live with a lot of people that believe the same thing they do are more religious. And a lot of times that's pushed on them, of course, and you don't have anybody to challenge those religious beliefs. This is why the South is generally more religious than the North or other cities, because they don't deal with the diversity. You know, one of the things that kind of was unexpected was after World War II, when we want to be whatever the opposite of the Soviet Union is. Well, the whole meme about the Soviet Union was they were atheists. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be the most Christian. We had Billy Graham, and we had a third Great Awakening. So my students have heard about the first and second Great Awakening. There was a third one. Unless we have some sort of revival like that, you know, if you look at other countries as a predictor, it will just steadily go down.
Do you
give it enough time, and it will be?
Sorry. Do you think that some of the rhetoric that came through with this past election with Christian nationalism and evangelical movements, do you think that's a response to what she's asking? There's a reduction of, and that scares people, especially here, maybe in the South or the Bible Belt region, where they're like, we have to react to this. We have to get more people involved. We have to be more stringent. We have to get into politics to push this back on people to get back to where we had been before. But do you think that's part of that narrative?
I think so. You have, for the last few years, especially I think in overall pushback against conservative religious-based philosophy and ideas. I think now that's shifted, maybe have shifted a little bit with this election and the current movement. I was reading a thing earlier on Twitter about a rise, Catholicism for the first time in a long time has seen an increase in people attending Mass.
Here in the U.S.?
Here in the U.S., which it's because of the scandals within the church with the sexual abuses that has seen a steady decline. And then all of a sudden, it's almost like it hit rock bottom, and now it's starting to climb its way back up. So I don't know if those percentages will hold, but I do agree that as you get more diversified and you bring in more outside voices, things.
Well, when we say people are identifying as less religious, that doesn't mean that they're less spiritual. It may mean that they're not as comfortable identifying with a particular group or a particular denomination. Yeah. Like, it doesn't mean that they've abandoned all those morals. It just might mean that they're confronting the leadership within inside those institutions where they're like, this doesn't necessarily represent me. The political side of it, perhaps. And we've seen that come and go in the past, too. So, I don't know. Like, that's interesting about what you said about Catholicism, though.
There's also a difference between church, religion, and community. Everybody's got to have some sort of community. And so as religion goes down, you will see people reach out to other communities. But I think as churches, the institution of the church starts to get threatened, you'll see more proactive by the religious community to try to convert evangelical Christians. Of course, that's one of the biggest denominations to support Trump, the biggest, actually. You're more likely to be an evangelical Christian than anything else if you support Trump.
But do you think it's because they felt threatened?
I think that's part. Yes, I think they feel
multiculturalism
because they see they feel the shrinking, and they feel that the churches are losing money. You know, back when I was a kid, you know, these $1 million churches and stuff. I think there is some of that. So you know, it's a pendulum too. It goes back and forth. So it'll be interesting to see. Really, I think the next 10 years, if there's not a big move, then you might see that.
Give the youth perspective there. Think about your friends, people that are your age.
I see from like my age group like a rebirth of religion personally, but that also could be Southern culture kind of thing. I have seen a couple of different news sources report on though that they do think different and varying religious communities is what won Trump the election. They're saying in Pennsylvania, the Amish community really pulled out a lot higher number of votes for Trump than the Amish community with voting for Trump like crazy. And then they're saying, isn't J.D. Vance a Catholic? And they said that pulled out a group of Catholic voters.
Wait a minute, the Amish.
Yeah,
Yes.
the Amish.
And
the
religious-
Amish got in their wagons and went to the polling stations and voted.
And religious
That is-
people are generally single issue voters.
It seems
So-
it seems odd though, just to think about that particular demographic, to vote for someone who is so worldly, so wealthy, what he represents and where he comes from. I wonder what drew them to him specifically.
Same
The
thing that drew all the
protection,
Christians
well, maybe the protection of people's religious rights, maybe, or to. I mean, they're such a self-isolating community. It seems that just strikes me as odd that they would jump on that particular bandwagon. Speaking of wagons, no.
I think it's the same thing that all religion. I mean, like Christians are dealing with this too. How do you support a person like Trump, born to wealth, gold, the way he talks? But they find a way. A lot of them are single issue voters too. It's like, oh, what does he think about that? Okay, that's it. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know anything else. And so we forget, especially in religious communities, single issue, one issue they care about, and they'll vote for that.
I
So
wonder how you broadcast to the Amish community. Because he didn't visit them as far as I know. Do they do radios and TVs? I don't think that's a thing. I mean, I don't know that much about them honestly, but it seems like that would be out of bounds if you don't have buttons. Then you probably don't have a radio or a TV or internet. So I wonder.
I
what
think he
he's out.
sent Giuliani down there. Like if you want
Maybe.
more shot, get down there. And,
No, well, I mean, good for them. I didn't know they had an opinion on this matter. All right, well, religion. We'll see what happens.
Hi, I'm Henry York. Big hypothetical here. If we go into like a recession or depression and maybe the Department of Education or something gets like abolished or something, like big hypothetical, what would someone like me do? And preferably not moving.
like if the Department of Education gets abolished specifically, or
Like privatized, something like that.
So, like, how is it affecting you, or how should you respond to it?
Like response.
Well, the Department of the federal Department of Education is going to be under the microscope here in the next few months because of the new Department of Governmental Efficiency. DOGE, as it's affectionately called. What do you mean by how will it affect you?
it should go to the states, right? So every
Yeah.
state will just start
It'll
doing their
kick
own
back to
thing.
the states,
Now,
so.
yeah, I mean, of course, private schools will and this kind of ties into the religion too, because most of our private schools are religious schools. So then people will have to make a choice, but I don't know that you would actually feel it as much as you might think if they, especially the Department of Education, which is, federal funding. Obviously, smaller schools that depend on that would suffer the most, but it would be all state controlled.
The federal mandates about special education, special services,
Right, yeah.
Title IX, like all kinds of control factors in place that help establish more of a sense of fairness and unity within inside the school system, because the states don't mandate those things necessarily or don't fund those things. And so if that department ends specifically, then what you'll see is an unlevel playing field for a lot of underprivileged students or people who have special challenges, and that then may cause them to bounce out of the system, or the states may have to be on the hook for trying to create something themselves, which I don't know whether they'll be able to afford that or not. So I don't know, we may see, I mean, that would be the first thing I would look at, not necessarily you specifically as a student, but students in general. I think that there are going to be a large number that are going to be affected in different ways if, in fact, that particular department is eliminated.
And if the states develop their own very peculiar education systems with no rules, you will see families that have the privilege to move, because nothing gets parents moving like getting their kids in a good school. So you will see a mass movement of people that can, and then a lot of people can't, so they're stuck where they are, and that'll be a lot of harm to those people that don't have the privilege to move to another state or another district.
Yeah. I know we also talked about this the other day. Potentially, if it does go to the states, the Department of Education is dissolved and it goes up to state rule. Arkansas has seen a history of consolidation of schools.
There you go.
So you might see lots of small schools being consolidated into the remaining big schools we have. So, for example, Lakeside might see the consolidation of Cutter. Like, we might have to absorb all of those students. You never really know how it's going to go.
And another thing that will come out of there is your homeschooling numbers will come up. And then part of the new homeschooling edict or promise from Trump has been a certain amount of money back to parents to help fund their own homeschooling for different things, plus the requirement, which they already do require, schools to allow homeschool students to participate in things like athletics and things like that. But, how will that play in the factor, or any extracurricular events, band or whatever, and how will that tie into the funding for those kids if it's also, the voucher system beefed up on steroids.
Here's something for you to think about, though. If more and more kids go with a voucher and they're taking their own money and let's say that they're homeschooling or whatever, the money goes there, it doesn't go to any other institution, but the public schools in the area are required to then provide services. The more students who leave that school system, there's less money for those services, there's less money for the facilities, there's less money for hiring staff and retaining them. And so you may end up with nothing for them to go to. You're stuck at home. I mean, you're undermining the stability of the system when you start taking millions of dollars at this point, up to I think this past year was like $30 million out of the system that basically went to private schools, some of the top private schools in the state. But whether the Department of Education goes away or not, whether we talk about that federal funding, go back to your consolidation thing, schools right now, because of the LEARNS Act here in Arkansas, they have to fund teacher pay. Right now, the state's helping them with that. This is the last year for that. And so from this point forward, the small schools, all schools are on the hook for that. Small schools are not going to be able to afford that. So they're going to do one of two things. They're going to cut staff. They're going to increase pressure on the teachers that are going to stay. They're going to, if they can't afford that, then they're going to have to shut down and bust those kids out somewhere else. And the facilities will either be taken over by private enterprises, charter schools, or that kind of thing, or actually, like I said, just shut down completely and you shuffle all those resources to other people. People are going to lose their jobs. It's going to happen within the next 2 years. We're going to see a massive shift in what community schools look like. It's just there's no financial way around that.
All right. A lot of optimism tonight. Next question.
Tariffs.
All right, go, sir.
I'm Barrett Tipton. This is a two-part question. Is the U.S. an empire, and if so, is the U.S. spreading its resources too thin in foreign affairs, which would lead the U.S. subject to similar fates as other empires who fell due to not being able to sustain their influence, such as Rome?
Empire down the road. Yes.
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 Second part was, are we spread too thin?
Where we're gonna fail previous Ottoman Empire, Rome, and all of those.
That's one of the things that Trumpy and the boys have been harping on. Those that we're spread too thin, that we've got too many. We're involved in too many people's wars. We're in this perpetual state of warfare, and that's not benefiting us in the long run, perhaps. And so this isolationism that they're talking about, or at least more isolated than we have been, is getting out of other people's business, getting out of NATO perhaps and letting Europe deal with its own security, getting out of Taiwan, letting them deal with their own security, getting out of Japan, letting them do their own security, getting out of the Middle East for sure, unless we're talking about Israel, which is probably going to continue to be a thing. Them and Egypt will probably continue to still get our money. But so, I mean, and you can spread yourself too thin, but our GDP is still the largest on the planet, and we have the ability to continue to fund all of our little side projects. So I don't think that we're in any danger of collapsing, if that's what you're asking. Could you, if you're involved in nonstop hemorrhaging of money out of the side of the system and you're not bringing anything back and you're not getting anything out of it? Yeah, I mean, it could be that. I don't think that's where we are.
One of the very interesting things to watch is how will the funding change here in the next couple years with the focus on government waste and spending. Are we spread too thin financially? Probably a little bit. Heard a statistic today that says 73% of military-age males in the United States are unable to meet the physical requirements to join the military today.
What number?
Like 73%. And you factor in mental health issues, disabilities, weight issues.
Unable to meet the requirements?
The requirements to join the military today.
Wow.
I would like to fact check. I just heard it today, so don't.
Okay.
It's not set in stone. But even if that number is 25%, that's still a very large number. So how long can we sustain the model to be the world's policeman, like Pumphrey was saying earlier? Our Navy after World War II, kind of agreement, we'll take care of the security. We'll keep the seas open for all. If you step out of line, we will come and take care of it for you.
The answer is we're keep investing in drone technology, and then you let them do the fighting. You just sit behind the desk and push buttons like you're playing Nintendo.
Yes, and how do we fund that?
Well,
do we
I
continue
was talking about the physical requirements.
The physical requirements, yeah. But how do we continue to fund those things with spending in these? Well, I guess the current term is forever wars. Yeah. You keep spending.
I know that we have the highest expenditure on military stuff out of all the countries, and matter of fact, the nearest top 10 combined. However, what is our percentage of GDP that's dedicated to that? I wonder. I know it's huge, but I don't know what the percentage is ultimately. So can you absorb that hit and continue that go? And I mean, Perhaps.
Okay, so the reverse of this is maybe we have to keep spending and forever wars going because we're the billions of dollars of government contracts that the military gets. My worry is we are a military industrial complex and that we have to keep this up or the whole economy tanks and millions of people will be unemployed. So one frame of thought is we need to retract to save, but my worry is if we do that, it all goes away because of the military spending is a must.
Charlie, what were you saying about military contractor stock stuff? We were talking about this a little earlier.
Oh, in the days since the election, every single stock in my portfolio has shown an upward trend except Northrop Grumman, which is a defense contractor. It has taken a sharp dive.
Sharp.
And
I looked at this.
So you're starting to feel that, and it's fun to say, we need to get rid of this wasteful spending and get rid of these ineffective bureaucracies and stuff like that. But there's also going to be a human cost to it. If you lay off half of the federal government, that is a couple million people, and a couple million people that has families, and those couple million people have a mortgage and they have a car payment and they buy groceries and they shop at these restaurants and there's
that's on the federal level too, because
yeah.
Our governor just announced that they're going to start doing the same thing here in the state. Like there's this efficiency program that they're about to do, and they're going to start realigning government agencies here in the state and starting cutting people loose. That's going to have an impact on our economy overall because, like you just said, it's going to have a ripple effect.
And if we pull people back, all the military bases, and we're starting to really cull that down, you're talking about construction companies and Lockheed Martin. We're talking about huge corporations that will lose billions, which will have to lay off their people too.
Also, allies who you're talking about military bases specifically, the thousands of soldiers that we may have stationed in one particular spot around the world, like they spend money in that country. They keep their services and things going because they're like after Germany reunited in the early 90s and we pulled our people, basically we shut down a lot of the military bases there that we were using to defend West Germany from East Germany. Their economy took a sharp decline because of our absence. Tens of thousands of soldiers then exited the system, and tens of thousands of their spending habits went away with them. And so that we have to consider what that impact would have on our allies that we do want to continue to trade with, by the way, since we brought that up earlier. I mean, what does that do to global economics?
So in conclusion, we are an empire, and we need to start a few wars and increase spending. More. I'm kidding.
Hey, back on the tariff thing. Do you? This was something I heard somebody say before in defense of tariffs. If you couple tariffs and the rise in prices that are going to hit with that immediately, have they considered eliminating the income tax or the payroll tax, which is a separate thing, by the way? If they do that, people have more money in their pockets, and then the tariffs only apply as a tax to people who choose to buy certain things. You don't have to buy certain things. You choose to buy certain things. So then it's only a tax on those people. It's a consumer tax, essentially. And you can choose what you consume. Is this actually a good thing in the long run?
You will have to provide people with a viable option for other items. Who's going to give up their cell phone? Who's not going to pay the tax on that? However, if you have a cell phone manufacturer in the United States that is tariff-free, people may choose to do that.
But we don't have a cell phone manufacturer in the United States, do we?
Not that... Maybe a flip phone, but not anything like a current smartphone technology that we all love and adore and are addicted to. And the technology sector is probably a little ways behind other manufacturing sectors, but there is a push for homegrown manufacturing in different industries.
Does China get around our tariffs by building factories here? Do we allow that?
And that may be the point. We was talking about in the hallway. I used a Toyota as example. The largest vehicle manufacturing plants in the country are Toyota manufacturing plants. So Japan had to ask themselves, do we make this truck this much more money and import it and have to pay this extra money? Or can we strike a deal and build a manufacturing plant in Georgia and employ a couple of thousand Americans? And that's not a bad thing to me. That's a fair compromise. Everybody wins in that situation, except maybe GM and Ford. Make a better truck, right?
Yep.
Economics is tough.
My name is Robbie Hoyt, and sort of a two-part question. Do you believe, specifically the assassination attempt, do you believe there was a single point in the election cycle that you could see a clear shift towards Trump pulling out ahead and taking the lead?
You mean the attempt in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And then second part, now that he is here, what are some, I guess, lesser obvious side effects of his term.
So Pumphrey, you had a good take on the moment after the shots ring out and he then stands back up. That newly iconic moment, that picture of him
The standing up and punching
that moment, the fist in the air.
Fight. First of all, it's incredible. I mean, I don't even know what it's like to take a shot in the ear, but to have the wherewithal to know this is a moment. I mean, you nearly die. And to not only stand up, but to your crowd, they're going to be taking pictures. There is something very patriotic. I mean, I was like, yeah. I mean, because there is something cool, just cool bro moment of a guy nearly getting shot. Screw it. I'm doing it. I'm getting right back up. It was crazy. And I don't know what it is in me. It's the sports guy. You get knocked down, you get right back up. There's a lot of that old school sports mentality, bravado, whatever. That I don't know of it. I couldn't have done it. You would have saw a little pee as I crawled out of the state. You'd have never seen me again. So like there is something about when they talk about Trump being a genius. Obviously, we know he's very limited in a lot of academic ways, but his genius is being aware of what will capture the moment, the people's attention. I don't know that was the shift, but that definitely didn't hurt him because the mug shot, you would think no one, I mean, it's the greatest political comeback in American history. Probably. It's like if Nixon had become president again after Watergate. It boggles the mind that he was able to come back from, if you look at 2021, especially 2022, when he lost Congress, basically, nobody wanted to even touch him. And here he is, president. So I'm not saying good or bad. I'm saying iconic moment, I guess you'd say.
Well, I think between that moment, which it said, okay, I was kind of wavering, but that's my guy. You don't attack us. And then you have his decision to make the podcast circuit, to sit down for 3 hours. And because we all know podcasts are the best thing in the world. But you have him sit down. Yeah. You have him sit down on
Joe Rogan,
Theo Vaughn, Lex Friedman. And you say, who are those? Millions of people listen to those podcasts.
Way more than
millions of people listen to them. And then you have those same people reach out to the Harris campaign and it was like, well, we will if you come to us. We limit to an hour, and you agree to edit the podcast. That's not how those podcasts work, and that's what people are consuming their information from now. That's where they get their news. That's where they get their information, and people are saying, okay, this guy, if you had a chance to listen to him, there was a line, and Joe Rogan was asking, or he was talking to Joe Rogan, and he goes, people love me. They just talk about me and talk about me. And I don't need to go and do these interviews. And I don't care if people say bad stuff. They just talk about me. And it's great. And he just goes, well, man, it's because you say a lot of crazy shit. That's been his whole shtick I equate it to the old Howard Stern show. And they say, the more people listened to Howard Stern so they could call in and complain. Which did what? Drove his ratings up. Which did what? Drove his ad revenue up. And it's kind of the same thing with Trump. There is no such thing to him as bad press. It's just press. But him to be willing to go and sit down for 3 hours and then she would not do that. I think that was the tiebreaker because I'll be very transparent. I did not vote for either one in this election. I couldn't vote for either one. So I'm sitting there undecided because she had changed my mind to vote for her, for sitting to listen to her talk for 6, 7, 8, I'm podcast junkie, 6, 7 hours. I would have listened to her as well because she had changed my mind and said, maybe I'll vote for her. I know I'm not going to vote for him because of January 6th, line in the sand, but will I vote for her? Don't know. She won't engage where I'm engageable now. And I think that was a big moment.
I think he's the master of self-promotion. I mean, I think that's what it boils down to. And to take that, go back to your question about the assassination attempt, the propagandized rhetoric of "I took a bullet for you," that resonates with so many people. So the second half of your question was, are there unforeseen sort of ramifications of this? We're watching him fill out his cabinet right now, and I have not seen anybody yet that's qualified. In my opinion, it's just a bunch of lackeys who are friends of his, and there's some interesting choices so far about who they're putting in strategic. I get that. I'm just saying, but when you talk about when you have people who are unqualified to take very serious positions within inside the administration, or who have very bizarre ideas on health and services, or on defense mechanisms, or whatever. Just watch the cabinet picks. It's not all going to be his decision making. It's going to be people who are in positions to make decisions that may not be able to make good decisions based on their lack of experience or their sort of bizarre sense of reality. So that may be something we see. I can't pinpoint. I could name names, but I'm not going to. You could pinpoint what might happen, but we'll have to wait and see.
So I've been sitting here thinking about it, and I was like, I don't think I could have pinpointed a specific turning point, because for me, I kind of thought up until election night, it was a toss-up. Like, I didn't really know which way it was going to go. But if I had to pick a turning point, I think once the Republican Party nominated Trump, and it was for sure Trump that was going to be on the ticket, and the Democratic Party was still kind of up in the air. There hadn't been the national convention yet, and they pulled Biden and put Harris. In the grand scheme of things, I think that was the turning point. The Democratic Party not taking the time to actually thoroughly look through the Democratic candidates to pick someone that had a larger potential to beat Trump. I think Harris could have, maybe. I think the biggest downfall of the Harris campaign was only targeting Gen Z. I think their marketing majorly targeted Gen Z and the younger voters.
It fell flat because it wasn't more broadly based.
Mm-hmm.
Well.
Yeah, and you look at that, and that was a big reason why. One of the reasons I could not get on board for voting for her is you cannot scream that democracy will end if you do not elect me when you do not go through the democratic process to be the nominee of your party. You can't. When
Biden won in 2020, one of the things that he did on the campaign trail was to promise that he would not run for a second term. If he had held that promise and allowed the Democratic Party to go through a real primary, to get somebody else who's vetted in that was the choice of the party, more people I think would have been attention.
Yes.
I do think that
I
the
agree.
switch in the middle was actually harmful to her candidacy, and it limited her. Now, I will say this, though. When you talk about being a toss-up, I looked at the final statistics. He won, and this is the closest election we've seen since 2000. He won for the first time he won the popular vote, but only by his is like 50.2. That is still an extremely divided down the middle vote. The cast fell in his favor, but it's not like some sort of landslide victory. It's not some sort of overwhelming red wave that they're going. They're going to promote it like it is. Look at me, and so bravo. But at the same time, don't get carried away with yourself. It's not she did hold her own in spite of the limitations with the limited campaign and the no primaries.
Yeah, I think they will get carried away with it. They think of it as a landslide. It feels like a landslide. It feels because of all the other things that Trump has been through. He never got the popular vote. He lost. And then all of a sudden, not only did he win, he won the popular vote, which no one really saw coming. But my take is we're academics. I always challenge my own perspective. And I think we're looking at policy. We're looking at what she's offering, what he's saying. It's feeling. Politics, we are in an age of feeling. And the working class America felt like he, or at least that movement, at least empathized with them. Where the Democrats just seem fake, same old, and you got to vote for me or else. And so I don't know. Trump is nothing if he's not authentic. Everybody knows who this person is. So I just think people just felt like, well, they seem like they're fighting for me. Well, and I do think it's we live in a feelings type age. No matter what people say, I think that's where we're at.
I had another thought, and while we were talking about this and the different speeches and the different marketing that Harris made, and it brought me back to what a minute ago when we were talking about religion and why maybe Trump had such a large turnout of the Amish and different religious groups. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but during one of her campaign speeches or whatever, someone yelled out something in relation to God or whatever, and she turned back and just said, "You're at the wrong rally." And it was majorly publicized by different Republican sources. And so maybe that's what called out a large demographic of religious voters.
I remember watching her say the whole "you're at the wrong rally" and people laughed and clapped. But I never knew what the protesting people had said first. I never saw that part. So it was something religious?
Yeah, it was.
It was something along the lines of like, I can't, like, God is good, or like,
Oh.
Well, at a Trump
Jesus
rally,
is king.
Yeah, when they said
Jesus
They said Jesus is king, and she was like, "You're at the wrong rally."
yeah.
States that you're a liar or insulted her. She was talking to them.
Okay. Oh, so you have a.
I think that's
So she's responding to something that.
what people were
maybe.
yelling. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if it was perceived.
Okay. So yeah, then it's just the marketing perspective of it from the opposing
Right.
side.
If it was
changing
perceived that she was talking about religion when she maybe wasn't, and you could spin that politically, you're
It
going
was
to jump on
it
that.
was bad optics. For
Bad
sure.
optics, yeah. So, well, yeah, I didn't.
But
know
it could
that's
have
how that went.
called out those religious voters. So that's just another thought.
Maybe, yeah.
My name is Xander Schultz. Was Kennedy a good president, or is he more remembered as good due to his assassination? Because several of his main actions that are attributed, like civil rights, the Apollo program especially, most of that was perhaps not the best term, but sort of a martyrdom from his death to be attributed to it. So what would be your thoughts on that?
No, yeah.
That's exactly my thoughts. I think he's the most overrated president in history. Now, having said that, he did change his mind halfway through on civil rights. He started to come around on civil rights. But everything he wanted to achieve was locked in Congress. Nothing was getting done. I mean, he created the Peace Corps, but I mean, it is his assassination that created the political climate where Johnson could take the ball and get civil rights done and get, Apollo space program is rolling and we're spending millions. His assassination.
So sympathy because of and the potential promoted martyrdom of his. So now we have to do it in his memory.
And
that's what you're saying.
Johnson is an old political cat, Southern Democrat, by the way. So he had to deal with his Southern friends who were not for the civil rights movement. He had a heart for the poor, and he used that. He used this. His speech was the greatest leader of our time has been struck down. Well, nobody thought of Kennedy as the greatest leader of our time, but he's saying that to get Republicans and Democrats on the same page so we could, and look, the next 5 years, Johnson accomplished a lot in 5 years. Unfortunately, he also accomplished escalating the Vietnam War. But yeah, I think Kennedy, everybody looks back on Kennedy as the one who did all this. Not really.
My mother, who was a young adult when all that went down, still has this sort of glorified image of who Kennedy was. I've heard it my whole life. Oh, John Kennedy. It's almost like I don't want to quite use the word deified, but at the same time, glorified for sure. He was the one and passed the torch, and it's the new age, and the youth vote. I mean, was the youngest president at the time? Was that? Yeah.
42.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that really struck home.
Did you know he cheated on his wife on their honeymoon? That's pretty bad.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't he known for in his personal life, he was not the
Oh,
greatest
no.
dude.
Unbelievable amount of women. I mean, reporters knew, they would go in, there'd be a blonde that would be leaving. They just knew. They couldn't report on it because at this point, the president's personal life had nothing to do with what they were doing. It's kind of a very different world now. But, yeah, he was a womanizer for sure. So.
It's different now?
Well, I mean, the media will jump on you if they catch you. They want to catch politicians. Very different now.
It is? We wouldn't elect a womanizer?
No, I mean, if they... Well, I mean, obviously, we know about Trump being a womanizer. They didn't know that Kennedy was a womanizer. It's different now because we know about it.
The press would hide it. They would often say,
Yes,
this has
the press
nothing to
is
do with
Okay.
with the president's ability to govern.
Right.
Which, and that all
I
changed
should've said the
with
press is
Ken
different.
Starr and Clinton and
Clinton, Watergate, the
and
whole...
Water. Yeah, all that,
I was
so.
confused. Okay. All right.
I am Aiden Bridges Hall. I'm not very politically knowledgeable, but many of my friends speak of mass immigration and how it poses many problems for America. How does it affect America politically, culturally, etc.?
You look at the demographics of the voting bloc, and you saw that Trump won the Hispanic vote, and people would scratch their head and say, and I was kind of thinking the same thing, and so I watched a series of interviews of people in border towns, and they have been there for 2, 3, 4 generations, and their parents were immigrants. They came over. Many of their parents were illegal, and I guess the best way that the clearest explanation I heard from a gentleman being interviewed, his dad wasn't a legal immigrant, went through an immigration process, and they're saying for 100 years on the border towns, there's always was a give and take between the two communities. It almost a symbiotic relationship where both needed each other and both helped each other. and it was understood there would be that help and a give and take from both sides. And this gentleman said, but it feels like it's all give on our side now. And it's overwhelming the infrastructure of the cities and the towns and the schools. And I think that played a huge part in how it's turned out politically.
It's not so much about immigration, it's the volume and the timing that matters most. We are a nation of immigrants. We have prided ourselves on that melting pot and all of that. But every time you see a mass influx in our country's history, there has been a crackdown. Whether it's the Irish, whether it's the Germans, whether it's the Italians, whether it's the Chinese, whether it's the Japanese, now whether it's people from Latin countries that are coming up, escaping whatever they're trying to escape. It's the volume and the timing. If you are to filter in and there's a process, then you have the resources available to help those people adjust and integrate into society. But when it's overwhelming the system, when there's no flow, there's no valve, basically, or it's a wide open valve, perhaps, especially on the border towns, let's say. But even if they're moved inside the country somewhere else, but the sudden influx of people, then there's not necessarily enough jobs for folks. There's not necessarily enough housing for folks. How do you get them transferred into the system so that they can be processed and they can work and pay taxes and become maybe a path towards citizenship? It can overwhelm and bog down the system, and that not only frustrates people, it scares people, because then where's the vetting that comes in? And not saying that the country has, I have heard this, they're like, well, it's all racist because they're wanting to limit the number of people coming across the border. Like, that's not a fair assumption. There may be racism involved in that story, but that's not the fairest way to articulate the whole thing, because you have to have a legitimate process and take care of folks who may be coming here for the wrong reasons. Like, that is something that is a consideration. And you can't just say people who live in border towns and they're scared or they're unable to move about. Look at all of these people. Like, you can't just go toss their opinions out the window and say, well, you're just racist. Like, that's too simplified, and it pisses people off, honestly, because now they feel that they're not being heard and they're not being taken care of. Like, we have legitimate concerns that need to be addressed. So let's go through a process. On the other side of that, though, you do have people who are seeking help, people who are fleeing violence, who aren't safe back at home. So now how do you handle that fairly, effectively, humanely? That's not an easy thing for anybody to deal with. The states have to deal with it, but the federal government has to be involved too. Is just slamming the door in their face the right option? We've done that before. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm saying we have done that before. Chinese exclusion acts and things like that. Like, nobody's coming. Turn your boat around. We're not letting you in. So it's not an uncommon event, but then you have to think about the logistics of how do you do that fairly, appropriately, and make it safe for everybody.
And whether you're directly seeing the effects, it was very effective because people felt like it's an issue. Just like the economy, people go, well, it's doing better than ever. Look at the stock market. But people felt like it wasn't doing well. And I'm telling you, this whole election to me felt like it was more about what it feels like than what maybe actually, and I think the MAGA movement did a good job of
to use
relating.
The border as a political tool, though, instead of fixing things, instead of regulating things, to use that as a launching pad for propaganda and to use it to win on your ticket, like that, I think is problematic. I think it's an abomination, honestly, because you could have done something sooner and you didn't, because you got political capital out of it. I think, but people didn't hold it against them, like you said. They felt this is the right thing to do, but fear motivates people. At the same time,
and immigration has been a crazy subject for decades.
Yeah, it's
now
not. It's not new, but it's not like the country's full. I've heard them say that. Well, the country's full. Turn your ass around and go home. Like, the country's not full.
Have you been to Iowa?
But
Montana,
a lot of open places.
Okay,
Henry York again. Top countries to live in if you couldn't live in the U.S.
Oh lordy, expatriates.
Oh, Canada.
I don't know, man.
It's close to home. I mean, I could drive home and see my parents.
I'm not sure.
Necessary, like
Canada's
compelled speech and forcing me to say certain things.
It's too damn cold.
I can't tweet what I want to tweet.
Canada's more conservative than you think they are.
North Dakota?
If I could live like I did when I was on my honeymoon in Jamaica, I would pick that. It was an all-inclusive resort, and all I did was sit around on the beach all day. So if I could do that, sure. But I haven't traveled enough to really get a feel outside the country.
Here's the other thing of that story where people go, I'm going to leave the country if something. Not everybody wants us. They're worried about immigration too. So just because you show up doesn't mean you get to stay. But what's a nice place to go? I've heard Portugal's nice. I've heard Spain is nice. Of course, right now it's underwater.
I feel like personally I'd pick Italy.
Italy's nice. They have a nice reciprocity. Yeah, so somewhere warm. If I had my druthers, I wouldn't go somewhere cold. I don't like being cold. So Canada. I've heard Scandinavian countries nice. Finland, but then again, it's like frozen, right?
I'm gonna say somewhere in the Netherlands would be nice too.
The Netherlands. Yeah.
Can't go to Australia. They won't let me keep my guns.
Australia.
I don't want to learn a language.
Get a
so
slingshot.
English speaking, please.
You don't want to learn a new language?
I'm too old. It's over.
Yeah.
I just now got English kind of under control.
I wonder if there's going to be this weird sort of reverse trend in more Americans if this goes south with all this new stuff that we're going to do. If people actually go south, I wonder if there's going to be like this reverse, like crossing the border into Mexico. It's like, hey.
Well, Mexico, it's net negative immigration for years now. It's not Mexico that's coming over.
Bienvenido. Come on across. So, maybe they'll welcome us in.
Bracero program, look that up. We're the one who's encouraged all this starting in World War II because we needed workers. So we basically bust in illegal immigrants during the harvest to work during World War II. And we kept that going until the 60s. So it's interesting how our government kind of got the ball rolling with immigration from the South.
It's what you need right now, I guess.
Yep.
Good
All
question.
right. Couple more questions.
All right.
Hi, I'm Haley, and I was wondering if you guys think that our governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who was the former press secretary of Trump, might be elected as the secretary for the Department of Education.
I saw we were pondering that, actually. Because could you take Learns Act nationwide? But she recently said, and I don't know if she's going to change her mind eventually, but she just announced a day or so ago that she's not planning on joining the Trump administration, that she's going to, and I think this is kind of smart for the overall sort of MAGA group that she's a part of. Like, you're going to need people on the state level to implement some of these things that you want. So the federal government can only do so much because of, states' rights and stuff. And so you'll need governors and lieutenant governors and AGs inside these states to actually implement things on the ground. So I wonder if that's the better plan for them, ultimately, is to keep her in place.
I think Trump needs as many MAGA-friendly
Allies
governors
around the
whether it's deportation or anything. He's got to have those governors to work with.
Yeah, so I don't know that she, in their vision of what everything should be, I don't know that she is best placed in his cabinet more on the ground in the state.
You won't see many state politicians being elevated. If you look at who Trump has picked so far, it's a newscast guy. It's already a federal congressperson. Governors are very valuable for him.
And it's people that Republican governors can appoint a like-minded person into that position when he's pulled them out for the cabinet. I was very, very surprised that she was not a part of the campaign ticket in some sort. And then
she was around him a lot, though.
I was even more surprised as the list of things started to come out that she did not get an appointment. But I didn't really take into account
I think it's strategy.
on-the-ground
strategy.
So.
Yeah.
But her dad is...
So dad's now the ambassador to Israel. So, that's something that people are celebrating.
I was
go ahead.
actually just about to ask what y'all thought about that. Him becoming the ambassador
about
to Israel.
Huckabee, the ambassador Huckabee.
Trump has been pretty strong supporting Israel, of course, obviously moving the capital to Jerusalem, and now having Huckabee, an evangelical Christian, thinking that Israel is our partner, and it helps solidify.
And Huckabee has been cozy with Netanyahu for years on the talk show circuit, on his own little show on whatever network he's on now. So it makes sense, and that gives a little boost to Netanyahu's power base, because that's in the balance right now in the Israeli politics, because there's been some people leaving and they're still protesting whether or not he should be in power in Israel. So I think it's given him a boost. And
you need to keep an eye on Iran and how all these other countries react as Israel starts pushing.
I heard on a news show this morning that Iran, it has been leaked and reported by some Middle Eastern news agencies that Iran has pushed back their plans for their next wave of ballistic missile attacks on Israel, and waiting to see what Trump is going to do when he gets in office.
I've also heard that Russia has escalated theirs because they think that Trump will demand a ceasefire
to get as much as they can before they can get more land.
That's the one thing about Trump is nobody really knows what he's going to do. Neither do the people over there, and he's going to be in control of the largest military humans have ever created. So they're also kind of like, we got to end this thing, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, we'll see.
Yep. All right, last question.
My name is Cooper Campbell. I don't mean to end the podcast on a bummer, but
Wow.
what do you guys think we could do to combat large corporations and their use of slavery within like the Congo, like
Oh, you're like the mining
or
forced labor and the slavery, yeah.
the Apple. Like,
what could we do
platform
to
manufacturers?
What could we do to end that?
Yeah,
Stop buying it.
Well, how could we make our corporations stop?
I'm just
How do we hold them
outsourcing
accountable?
that? Yeah, like holding them accountable.
Yeah, I mean, it's the other countries, of course, that are in charge of their own country, and these are deals being struck with American corporations. And those countries will keep doing this as long as the corporations pay them, and the corporations are going to keep doing it as long as we pay them as consumers. So I don't know these, except stop buying from corporations you think are doing this. You just got to have enough people do that.
We're
It's
not
a
the only.
complicated-
I'm not trying to minimize our impact in that part of the story, but we're not the only consumers either. I don't know
Right.
that we end up stopping that, even if all of our consumers were like, "We're going to boycott everything because it's immoral." And okay, I don't know that it ends even if we pull out completely.
It's similar
I
to
don't
like
know
climate
that.
change. You know, we could clamp down and destroy our own economy trying to change, but if the other countries don't get involved too, then it's not going to do any good.
I'm not saying there shouldn't be advocacy in
Right.
pushing, but
Well,
no
and then
matter
there's
what
the,
no matter what we do, I don't know
sanctions
that it
possible.
actually makes a huge difference. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be concerned and that people should be more aware of that, but ultimately, I'm not dancing around it. I just don't know what kind of impact we could actually have.
Well, our economy is pretty important, so I feel like sanctions could.
Yeah.
If we impose sanctions on, let's say we're imposing sanctions on a country that we know is actively using child labor, slave labor, whatever, they are still going to find a country that is willing to consume their product.
And
So
it'll
it's,
drive
we,
up the
we just
price.
can't, we can't control what that country's going to do.
That doesn't take away the sting or the stain on each individual consumer who has a product that has come from those countries. But again, how do you even? Again, I'm not trying to make me sound like some sort of apologist on this. I'm not, because I think it's wretched. But at the same time, what do you do that could have an impact? Ultimately, can you guarantee it? I don't know. Maybe a united front of all the countries that are involved in consuming these things could have some sort of negotiated bargaining to say we're all going to stop. I think that's what it would take until you change your ways. Like pay people instead of enslaving
or
them.
technology moves forward and we don't need that anymore, and there's some other way to get the resources we need.
I think the closest thing you could relate to it is our diamonds and the diamond industry. Now the technology is there that you can grow diamonds in a lab that are just as beautiful as real diamonds. But it'd be interesting to know how those cells compare to real diamonds. Or people, okay, well, I know it's fake, but I'll buy it. I'm not going to buy my wife a fake diamond. That's not good, Can you outweigh the moral implications of that?
Or can you convince enough people that they need to personally get involved? It's seemingly personally affecting you, and therefore out of sight, out of mind. I mean, I don't know how many people would really stand up today and go marching out and demand a change. I don't. How would you organize that effort? Maybe. I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Well, it starts with spreading the information, spreading the message, and just slowly demanding more from those people. And eventually that starts getting different laws and regulations passed, what we're willing to import, what we're willing to do. But what do you believe in more? Climate change or not enslaving the people of the Congo? Which one do you want? You can't have both right now. Which one are you going to pick? Well, I got to have my electric car so I can save the environment. Okay, clean air is more important than those kids. Which one is it? Sometimes you have to pick and choose your battles, and I
still think
know.
it takes an international effort.
Yes.
I also would like to acknowledge that the United Nations is famously bad at getting anything done or getting countries to change their ways.
Right.
I'm not sure, you correct me if I'm wrong, but if they've even addressed the issue of Uyghurs in Turkestan, in East Turkestan. So I'm not sure if they'd be able to get anything done.
There's only so much you can do when your whole mechanism is diplomacy. You don't. There's nothing. They don't have a force. There's no power to make people do certain things. It is about negotiation. That's what the heart of it is about. So if the countries combined choose not to do something, the United Nations itself doesn't have any ability to go off and create change. It's not.
Without the United States, they definitely don't, and they definitely can't go inside a single country and generally deal with their issues. It has to be cross borders, country conflicts, things like that. All right.
Do what we can do.
We are way past our time. Thanks to the Collective Coffee.
Yep. Staying up and late for us. Thank you, Collective.
And, be good to each other.